It's early in the morning. Bill is sitting in his home drinking a cup of coffee, dreading the long day's work in front of him. He used to be a farmer. Days were long and hard, pay was little. He decided to shift careers, and now he sits behind a desk in an office. He hates it. He gets paid more, but cares less and less about that every day. Bill and his boss Alice do not get along at all. She is cold and uncaring, thankless at good work, and furious at poor performance. Bill misses seeing the outdoors, feeling the sun's warmth. He misses the simplicity of his tasks. He thinks to himself, today is the day. Bill stopped by the farm before work and asked for his old job back. The head of the farm told him, "You can start today, but my one opening might be gone tomorrow. Your call, kid." Bill thought to himself, I'm going straight over to my boss and quitting. No finishing today's shift, no 2 weeks, no arguments, no points to make, just honesty. This isn't the life for me. I'm done. His nerves start to creep in as he walks over to his job. His confidence begins to fade. His hands are sweaty and he's starting to get second thoughts. I'll just give my 2 weeks. It's the respectful thing to do. It's not so bad. I kinda like some of my coworkers. I could save some money up and start a farm of my own. In 35 years. He snaps out of it. No, I am quitting today. Heading home, throwing on my overalls, and I'm gonna get back to work on that farm. What's the worst that could happen? Alice gets upset, throws a tantrum, calls me unprofessional. I don't give a dang about her. She can kick rocks, Bill says. Bill has been daydreaming that scenario for so long that by this point he has arrived at work and is about to confront his boss. He has no more time to think. It's time to act. He bursts open the door, marches over to Alice, and proudly exclaims, "Alice, I am sorry to say that I have decided to quit." Before he gets a chance to get another word out, Alice pulls out a strange, sci-fi looking doodad, points it directly at Bill, and pulls the trigger. Bill has suddenly been zapped and is teleported to a faraway strange land known as Night City. Little did you know, this whole time, Bill was you. Some of you may be familiar. Bill stands for Barely Informed Local Lifeform. That's you. You have been whisked away into the dystopian alternate reality of Cyberpunk in the year 2077, specifically in Night City. This is it. This is your life now. Good luck. Forget your friends, forget your family. You have been sucked into this reality. And you are not the main protagonist of a video game. You don't have infinite reloads upon your inevitable death. Bullets hurt. Hell, falling or tripping hurts. Eating food from a vending machine hurts. Wake up, ding dong, you have a colon to burn. It's not all bad though. Luckily, I, Ranger of NV Ranger & Co., have been hired by someone who cares about your well-being to guide you throughout the city and make a decision on where you are going to live and make a new life for yourself. Night City is a giant place. We have 6 districts and 17 different sub-districts. So you and I, Bill, we're going to go on a journey throughout all of those sub-districts and then rank them accordingly. All initial rankings are subject to change by the end, and there can only be one S-tier ranking, no matter what. One goes into S, that's it. So Bill, the first stop on our journey is going to be in Watson, which is comprised of 4 different sub-districts and sits just north of the city center. We will begin in what I believe is Watson's defining sub-district, the Northside Industrial District, NID, or just Northside. As we walk around Northside today, we can see the husks of what remains. Northside used to be the engine to not only Watson, but Night City as a whole. Don't tell them I told you, but Arasaka, the mega corporation, decided to take out much of its competition. Unfortunately, a lot of that competition was functioning in this sub-district. When that competition fell to Arasaka, so did Northside. In Night City, homelessness, drug addiction, unemployment, gang warfare, this is the norm. This is life for many people who live here. So when a sub-district makes a name for itself out of those things, you know it is particularly bad. There is a deeper issue with Northside though that makes it much more difficult to live in. You see, back in the day, whenever Northside had a lot of promise, influential people are funneling money into it. That's how we start to get the warehouses, the factories, and all this infrastructure put in that becomes really beneficial to the area and creates a lot of jobs. But then when Arasaka destroys all of its competition, that competition has to leave the area and thus leave those factories and warehouses abandoned. And they don't just fill up with rats and roaches, they fill up with maelstrom and scavengers. Look, Bill, the reality is you're going to have to get used to living near gangs. This is just a part of Night City, but the gangs that you do live near matter. Northside just happens to be home to a couple of the worst gangs imaginable. I guess on the bright side, at least with Maelstrom, you can very easily recognize them because even by Night City standards, they are nearly disfigured with the amount of cybernetic enhancements they commit to. Due to that excessive cyberware use, they are often on the verge of, if not already within, cyberpsychosis. And to pair with that lovely mental state, they enjoy taking insane drug cocktails to chase an unreachable high. When it comes to organized gangs, Maelstrom are the low of the low. They're the least respected by the other gangs. They have no honor, no code. They just kill indiscriminately. They'll kill children just for fun. They'll capture you and do cyberware-based experiments on you in excruciating pain and torment. They're the bottom. Almost. The only group that gets as low as Maelstrom, if not lower, are the Scavengers, but they're not a gang in the typical sense, they're a bit more decentralized. Bottom line is, their operation looks like this: kidnap somebody, rip off their cyberware, harvest their organs, sell it on the black market. Perhaps this has something to do with the common saying about Northside. You move to Northside, you'll die in Northside. And once again, unemployment is very high in the North Side, so it's going to be hard to get yourself a job, and beyond that, if you can get one, it's not uncommon for people here to work 18-hour days for very little pay. And that work would likely involve you working in one of the various factories or power plants that is still operational. This place is in such disarray that the Northside docks are entirely controlled by the Maelstrom gang. Northside is visibly a wreck. You have destroyed cars just laying about, grass overgrowing the sidewalks. You still have a few of those factories and power plants operational, which is making this place a particular hotbed of pollution. Of course, much of Night City is going to put you in harm's way of pollution, but here in specific, you're probably at higher risks when it comes to diseases that would come as a result of that pollution. We do have 2 mega buildings here in Northside. This will likely be where you end up living, at least at first. Mega buildings as a concept are cities within a city. They are the answer to overpopulation and overcrowding. How do they answer that question? They overcrowd and overpopulate one giant building. Each mega building is comprised of thousands of apartments. The lower you go, the worse they are. The higher you go, the nicer they are. Regardless of where that apartment is in the mega building, it's going to come with a vending machine to pump processed nonsense into your mouth and a television to pump commercial nonsense into your brain. Are you excited to be in Night City yet, Bill? Each mega building is going to have a security force and will be surrounded by a set of mall-like amenities. So if you haven't gotten the picture yet, you're sort of like living in an apartment that is inside of a mall. Every morning you can watch Paul Blart go by in his Segway, and then you can go grab yourself a boba tea and a corn dog for breakfast. Welcome to paradise. Anyway, within Northside, we have Mega Building H11 and H12, but there's a strange situation with H12. On H11, we can see it is addressed as WN185, that's Watson 185, but when we look on H12, it's addressed AW930, likely standing for Arasaka Waterfront. This could likely mean that the Arasaka Corporation purchased Mega Building H12, and thus it's reserved for the workers of the Arasaka Waterfront, meaning we're going to have reduced housing here in the North Side. Now it's time to make a decision on where we're going to rank the North Side. Now, one thing I'll say about this district, when compared to the other districts at least, is it's a bit more wide and open. You can see more of the sky. Instead of seeing a bunch of skyscrapers blocking out the sun, you'll see the occasional smokestack or power plant, but they're a lot smaller. They don't take up as much vision. So if there's one benefit to the north side, it's that it doesn't feel as congested as some of the other districts do. There's no getting around it. Northside is all of Night City's issues turned up, but maybe not quite turned up to 10, because you see, while Northside is bad, it's not a combat zone. So I'm not going to put it into F tier, I'm going to put it into D tier. If you don't know what a combat zone is,
well, Pacifica is still Pacifica.
We'll get to that later. So now let's hop in the car, Bill, and get the hell out of here. We clearly don't want to live in this place. Our next district is going to be a short trip. It's the Arasaka waterfront. Whenever Arasaka took that massive dump on Watson's hopes and dreams, it had the audacity to buy a large chunk of it and turn it into its own personal waterfront. The Arasaka waterfront is not a neighborhood where people go, one day I'm gonna live in the Arasaka waterfront. No one says that. It's essentially just a heavily guarded megastructure owned by the largest corporation in Night City. The only somewhat residential place in this whole area would be Kabuki Plaza, and this is one of, if not the most expensive hotels in all of Night City. Given we're coming here with no money, because even if you could somehow bring your dollars to Night City, they wouldn't be worth much, if anything at all, so you couldn't stay here. We're just gonna have to default the Arasaka waterfront to F tier. And again, we can see just how close Mega Building H12 is to the Arasaka waterfront, and it even shares its color scheme. So you could potentially work at the Arasaka waterfront and go live there, but that's technically in Northside, so that only gives a little bit extra benefit to Northside. It doesn't help out the Arasaka waterfront as a reasonable place to live. To be honest, I wouldn't want to work for Arasaka. They seem like a blood-sucking, power-hungry corporation of all corporations, so let's take a stroll into Little China. As you walk around the streets of Little China, you'll notice that it feels like downtown, essentially. It looks very similar to the densest urban sprawls of Night City, and that's not by mistake, because it was originally built as an extension of downtown whenever Watson was in its prime. Now, at this point in 2077, that isn't really the case anymore, but Little China, or the sub-district that was, wouldn't have the same fall off that the rest of Watson did. Because you have this massive urban sprawl that isn't too far from downtown in the more desirable areas of Night City, it was adopted with open arms by many different people and filled out differently, and not as abandoned as a place like Northside is. Because you have this valuable slice of Night City just left up for grabs, you end up getting this mix of middle to lower and middle to upper classes blending together, and what actually ends up being a decent and pretty realistic location for a newcomer coming into Night City. Mirroring that mixed bag nature of Little China, we also see that the gang control over the area is unclear and also a mixed bag. You have a ton of gangs coming into this spot, but none of them actually controlling Little China. The Tiger Claws are probably the most relevant gang in the area, and their culture, their design is more built around business before violence. They're not like Maelstrom. They're not just off the rails looking to kill people for the fun of it. Now, you could certainly argue that that comes with a significant set of downsides. So on one hand, where you have an area like the North Side where Maelstrom has very little competition and they run the show, that presents its own set of issues. But when you have an area where there could be a lot of gang fighting because there isn't a clear ruler over a pretty desirable piece of Night City, then you could get caught in stray fights between gangs. To balance that out a bit, Little China is home to Night City's medical center, meaning trauma team might be a little bit closer to you if you do end up in the crossfire of those gangs. This is an armed paramedic service who will show up within 7 minutes, clear out the dangers that are being posed to you if they're still in the area, and then give you the medical treatment you need. You may end up with crippling medical debt for the rest of your life. That is very possible, especially if you don't have a nice policy from one of the major corporations that you may or may not work for. To be honest, if you're from the United States, I pretty much just explained our healthcare system to you, so if anything, this is an improvement considering they're going to show up in an AV. Little China is home to Mega Building H10, and just outside of Mega Building H10, we also have an NCPD precinct to help keep those gangs a bit more under control. But here's where Little China really starts to show its potential within Night City, because when we have all of these skyscrapers and it was supposed to be an extension of downtown, this place was built up to be used by the mega corporations. But again, they left Watson when it started to fall under and Arasaka took over. So now you have this massive amount of infrastructure. You have all of these skyscrapers up for grabs. So you can go live in an apartment in a different skyscraper. You could start a business in one of them. You're not limited to the mega buildings. And it's not that all of the districts, people only live in mega buildings. That's not the case. But you just have a lot more options in Little China because what's been left by those corporations. Little China is also going to be more affordable. Housing is going to be affordable. Not that you're going to be able to buy your own house. I'm sure that's unlikely. But getting an apartment and having rent that you can actually pay, you might be able to do that in Little China. Beyond that, entertainment, cheaper bars, restaurants, casinos, strip clubs. You can get a part of that night city experience that you can actually afford. Little China is the place for that. And even if you don't want to stay here forever, this would be a good place to start out and start to work your way up from. Little China is like night city on a budget that isn't too dangerous. So considering that, I'm having a hard time not putting it right into A tier. Maybe this one would end up in S tier, but I think it's a bit premature to throw something in the top category just yet, so we'll hold off on that for now. Little China is going into A tier, and that will bring us to its neighboring sub-district of Kabuki. Kabuki is not only fun to say, but it's also really fun to look at. It's this very interesting little slice of the Northside that has a shanty town, almost favela-like setup that pours down onto this inlet of the Del Coronado Bay. It's a very unique district that is tucked within the denser urban portions of Night City, but it almost looks like this little diorama, like a kid threw together some Legos and accidentally created this very interesting masterpiece. If you're within Kabuki, it can feel kind of big and cluttered, and it surely is. It has these tangled, weaving alleyways that go all throughout it that don't look like they have much sense, but it's just how they were naturally created. But when you pull out a bit, it's like there's this tiny little city that was just placed within a really big city. The thing is, Bill, you probably should pull out of Kabuki because it is the poorest sub-district in all of Night City that isn't within Pacifica. In many ways, Kabuki is Little China, but with the problems turned up and the benefits turned down. It's abandoned. It used to be a relevant medical-based area from a lot of Japanese corporations, but they moved out of Watson, just like we've discussed over and over, and that left Kabuki in a rough state where it's now home to a lot of gang activity and shady dealings. I'll be honest, I'm a bit biased. I like Kabuki. I like the look of it. I like how it's a bit smaller. I like how so much sunlight comes in that they actually are able to leverage solar energy. It's got this big town, small city feel and is even described as having a mix of Far East meets Wild West. The sound of that is just so cool. Kabuki is a tempting yet dangerous mistress. There's a good chance that while you'll find affordable living here, you'll also easily stumble into problems that you might be able to avoid in a place like Little China. So I can't rank it as high as Little China, but I'm also not going to rank it as low as a place like the Northside. With that being said, we're going to put Kabuki into C tier. I would stay away from the northern sections of it because the more north you go in Kabuki, the more it starts to look like the Northside Industrial District where you have those abandoned factories and maelstrom starting to leak in. Definitely stay away from there, but if you stay towards the middle and lower parts of Kabuki, you should be a bit better off. One of the major issues, though, with it being one of the poorest sub-districts in Night City is your ability to build from here would be quite difficult. So maybe you can avoid trouble, maybe you could enjoy what Kabuki is, but if you're looking to get out of this area, make a better life for yourself, that's going to be hard. So I'm fine with it being in C tier for now. So that wraps up our assessment of Watson for now, and you've probably already noticed that I've color coordinated each sub-district with its district so we can see how each district stacks up across our rankings here. So now we're going to briefly move on to the city center, and I don't think we need to spend all too much time breaking down this area because one, it's a district that's only comprised of 2 sub-districts, and 2, I don't think it's going to be very attainable. If you're familiar with Cyberpunk, not even necessarily Cyberpunk 2077 and that specific universe, but the Cyberpunk genre more generally, you know that one of the core aspects of it is wealth disparity. When we're looking at Watson, we see the bottom end of that wealth disparity, how the majority of people are faring in a cyberpunk universe. But then when we look at the city center and the next district we're going to look at actually, we see the other side of the wealth disparity. So when you look at the cyberpunk universe, you generally have a situation where the vast majority of people, so all the way from homelessness and the lower class to middle and upper middle class, it's probably going to be the case that they are much closer to one another in terms of their finances than the upper middle or middle class is to the actual elites of that society. So within this universe and Night City specifically, you're going to have a very small percentage of people holding the vast majority of the power and wealth, and then the vast majority of people having very little left to fight over. And you could absolutely make the argument that that is the case with our current reality, and that's not surprising because Cyberpunk is about turning a lot of the aspects of our society, the negative things, and turning it up to 10. So you have this, of course, dystopian future. We can get a general idea as to what living expenses would look like based on the sub-district you're in, based on the information we're given in-game. So in the north side of Watson, you have the Sunset Motel, which supposedly goes for about €5,000 per month. Then when we look at the Corpo Plaza at the Regal Residencies, we can see that rent there can be 110,000 eddies per month. And when we look at the city center, the two reference points for places to live would be this Regal Residencies apartment and then Mega Building H9. When we go to the base of Mega Building H9, this lobby area down here, we can actually see that the people appear to be corpos, business people. They're likely high earners, so just because this is a mega building doesn't mean that anybody can live here. We're going to have to do some assuming here because many of the things that we're considering revolve around safety, ability to find work, what's the economy of that sub-district like, and then also how realistic is it for you to get a place to live within that sub-district. It's entirely unrealistic to think that you're going to be able to live in a place like North Oak. This is just for the elite of the elite, the richest people in the entire city. You'll have to work a lifetime to just end up not making it realistically. So behind that would probably be downtown in Corpo Plaza. What's a bit surprising is that I think Corpo Plaza might be a bit more realistic because if you get a job for one of the corporations, a relevant position at least for this area, they're more likely to want to put you in that mega building so that you're close by for work. That might be a bit of a nightmare to some people, but I think it's more realistic for you to end up in Corpo Plaza, Mega Building H9, than ending up in an incredibly expensive apartment in downtown. And even if you're able to get a job that puts you in Corpo Plaza with one of the corporations, this doesn't necessarily mean you're safe just because you're in a nicer district within Night City. In many ways, the megacorps are just wealthier and more legitimized versions of the gangs in Night City. If you're at the bottom of the totem pole and you end up crossing the wrong person, accidentally offending someone, or just ending up in the crossfire where someone in upper management makes a mistake and you look like a nice fall guy, you could end up dead on the streets or somewhere at the bottom of Del Coronado Bay. This place has also been the ground zero for a nuke and corporate war, so just because you're here doesn't mean that violence couldn't suddenly break out. It has in the past. Don't get me wrong, if downtown or Corpo Plaza seemed to be as affordable as a place like Little China, we could put it high up on the list because all of these issues you could argue are present in many of the other districts, but the thing is, they're not very affordable, and I think it could be overstated as to how safe you would actually be if you existed in one of these spots. With that being said, downtown is going to go into F tier. Might be controversial, but I'm okay with that. It's going to go above Arasaka Waterfront though, because one, Arasaka Waterfront is not a residential sub-district, and two, if you explore Arasaka Waterfront and roam around looking for an apartment, you're probably going to get shot. At least in downtown, you can go look for apartments that you can't afford. Corpo Plaza is a tough one. I'm thinking C tier for this one, but now the question is, do we put it above or below Kabuki? Kabuki has the edge when it comes to accessibility for everyone. I don't think you'd have a hard time getting into Kabuki and finding somewhere to live. But now the questions are, how safe are you? Are you able to find consistent work? These sorts of things. Whereas Corpo Plaza, I think less people are going to be able to get in here, but if you do have some sort of relevant experience that would fit you into Corpo Plaza, then this could be something of a decent place. I'll admit there is some personal bias here leaking in, but I hate the idea of the corporate rat race climbing up that ladder just to fall all the way back down over some nonsense that you can't control, so I'm gonna put Corpo Plaza below Kabuki. And just to hammer home that point a bit, if you've ever worked for an enormous billion-dollar corporation, just imagine what that might be like in this dystopian future where these mega corporations have the powers of sovereign states. Just to be clear, Night City's City Hall used to be in the city center, of course, and this would be Night City's government. Well, it's not anymore. The corporations pushed it out, so it's in the Glen, which is a poorer area of the downtown region. I'm gonna be honest, Bill, I'm starting to feel an Arasaka crosshair on the back of my head, so we need to get as far away from this place as we can and head back northeast towards Westbrook. The first sub-district we are going to look at in Westbrook will be Japantown, which is kind of like a more relaxed, accessible, or touristy version of downtown, or perhaps a more upscale version of Little China. Now, Japantown is kind of interesting because it's known to be, or at least have the potential to be, quite expensive, but when we look at the housing availability, I think you can see a different picture here. So the apartment we have available to us in Japantown runs you 30,000 eddies per month, which sounds high, but when we look at the other apartments available in-game, it's actually on the bottom end. Northside's Sunset Motel, again, costs 5,000 eddies per month. This is an outlier, though. That one is so cheap in comparison to the other ones that have some price attached to them. Again, we just mentioned the Corpo Plaza one, which is going to run you 110,000 eddies per month. And then the Glen, when we get there, we'll see that the apartment available there is 80,000 eddies per month. So then when we look at this apartment in Japantown that's only 30,000, it's quite cheap. Or at least we can argue it appears to be affordable relative to the other ones available for rent. I think what may be the case is that Japantown can be very expensive, especially if you're a tourist or a corporate worker looking to come unwind, hang out at one of their clubs, restaurants, casinos, things like that. It's going to end up being expensive because it looks to serve that market. But then when we look at Mega Building H8, which is where people actually live in Japantown, many of them at least, and then we inspect the demographics on that lower level, we can see a lot of people are wearing what would be referred to as kitsch. So what we likely would have been seeing in Northside of Watson is people wearing a style known as entropism, which is necessity over style. This is the style of poverty in Night City. It's just the reality. But then when we look around and we see people wearing what we can describe as kitsch, this is style over substance, and this is more of the common person. This is what most people are going to be wearing in Night City, who aren't falling all the way to the bottom, but certainly aren't anywhere near the top economically. And just to finish painting the picture of the styles within Night City and what they're associated with when it comes to economic status, you have neo-militarism, which is going to be popular among the corporate workers. Whether they're already extremely wealthy or they're climbing that corporate ladder, this is going to be not too flashy, but those really sleek corporate suits. And then finally, you have neo-kitsch. Neo-kitsch is kind of like kitsch, but it's not for your average common person at all. It's the way for some ultra-wealthy celebrity to take that common person's style, but then add aspects to make sure everyone knows they can't afford this, like going and getting an authentic Jaguar fur coat. And these styles are further represented from cyberware to hair to vehicles. It's not just limited to the clothing. And again, here in Mega Building H8 in Japantown, a lot of people are wearing kitsch, so this mega building might be decently affordable. I think there could be a lot of opportunity for you in Japantown because you have a lot of tourists, a lot of corpos, people with money, so this place probably has a good economy and you can figure out some sort of business to start or work for so you can make yourself some money and afford Mega Building H8. There always has to be a catch though, and it's very likely that a business you start or a business you work for is going to be involved with the Tiger Claws gang in some way. Japantown is their turf, especially when night falls. This isn't one of those mixed bags, we're not sure who runs the place like a sub-district in Little China. Japantown is Tiger Claw territory. You have to stay out of their way or stay in their good graces. That would be ideal. The leaders of the Tiger Claws would like their gang to operate business first. They're just trying to make money, but the soldiers, if you will, for the Tiger Claws are the guys who can end up getting you into some trouble. It's not uncommon for some of those lower ranking members, especially at night, to go around looking for trouble, getting drunk and starting problems. So if you end up in their way, you could get killed for no reason, not too dissimilar to how Maelstrom acts. Maybe you want to start your own little business in Japantown and you're making ramen that tourists buy and they think, oh, I'm eating authentic ramen in Japantown, and then all of a sudden, Tiger Claws members are trying to extort you for most of your profits. There might be ways around this or to work a bit more cohesively with them, and beyond that, this is always going to be a risk in just about every sub-district of Night City. You can be extorted and pushed around by gangs or megacorps. It's just a problem that you have to deal with, so we can't hold it against Japantown too specifically. With that being said, I'm going to put Japantown in A tier, but behind Little China. That could change. We'll see how this goes as we proceed, but that's where they're going for now. This next one we should be able to breeze through quite quickly. It's the North Oak Residencies. Now this is basically Night City's answer to the Beverly Hills, and again, like many things in this universe, just turned up to 10. This is a neighborhood for the ultra-rich. I'm not saying it's completely impossible for you to end up living in North Oak, but you have to be something around 0.1% of the 1% to afford to live in a place like this, and even that might be generous. Something that's interesting about North Oak, a quote that's associated with it, is green is the new gold. Because this is this dystopian future where the world has just been sucked of its resources and you have this terrible climate change that's occurring and brutalizing the landscape, what the ultra rich can afford is to have grass and palm trees and sort of this natural landscape built around them artificially, of course. We can even see Villa Uridine has its own artificial beach put into it. This isn't just a pool. I mean, when you go underneath, it's clearly there to simulate the beach experience in your own backyard. This is the peak of opulence in Night City. These villas probably make the various apartments and residencies in the city center look affordable. This is also where you're going to see that neo-kitsch style of the celebrities and ultra wealthy, but beyond that you have an intricate and well-established security system to keep out the poors, like us. This is difficult to call because of how inaccessible it is. It fits right into that F-tier category with Downtown and Arasaka Waterfront's Konpeki Plaza because these places are reserved for the elites. So I suppose if you end up in that economic range, North Oak is probably the best of the three, so I'm going to put it at the top of F tier for that reason. The last sub-district we have in Westbrook is Charter Hill, which is noted as being the best version of Night City life a mere mortal can realistically obtain. It's said that this is where a lot of middle-ranking corpos live. It's still going to be incredibly expensive, and another negative aspect of Charter Hill is that it doesn't have a mega building. In my mind, a mega building is just going to increase the potential or the likelihood that you can actually live in one of these sub-districts. So when we look at another sub-district like Japantown, it certainly has the potential to be incredibly expensive, but it also has more affordable housing options. Charter Hill doesn't really have that. You have to be some sort of mid-level corpo making a lot of money to be able to afford an apartment here. It's also not the same sort of tourist attraction, so your ability to make money within the sub-district is pretty limited as well. It's said that a lot of the people who live in Charter Hill are those corpos who go hang out and play in Japantown, and then they go to Corpo Plaza for work. On the bright side though, it's a lot safer. You don't have the same kind of gang activity in Charter Hill. It's known to be a pretty safe community. Living in Charter Hill means essentially dedicating your life to one of the corporations or being a top performer within your niche. If you're some sort of artist or musician, you have to be a 1%er at the top, making a lot of money, and that income has to be consistent. It's noted that the people in Charter Hill are living in this precarious, stressful situation where they're working really hard to afford their place to live, looking off at North Oak, hoping one day they can afford one of those nice, opulent villas, but the reality is they might end up slipping off and living in Santo Domingo or Watson. In many ways, it seems that Charter Hill is a more residential version of Corpo Plaza or the city center, so I'm going to put this one just above Corpo Plaza, but I'm still putting it below Kabuki because it's not accessible. And some of you Bills might be thinking, but you just said Charter Hill is the nicest neighborhood that a Night City resident could realistically obtain. But that's kind of the point. The idea of Charter Hill is the way for the landlords of that sub-district to extract money out of those who are actually pretty wealthy. The majority of us aren't going to be able to afford Charter Hill. It's a luxury sub-district. That's the whole point. It's reserved for those who can actually afford it. And if you could afford to live in Charter Hill, you'd probably be better off saving a bit of money by living in a neighborhood like Little China or Japantown. All right, Bill, that's 3 districts down. We got 3 to go. Hop in the car. We're headed to Haywood. Haywood is the neighborhood that sits on the southern part of that central island where we had downtown and Corpo Plaza. Let's begin in the east of Haywood with Vista Del Rey. This is probably the worst sub-district within Haywood. So far, a lot of our lower ranked locations have been there because they're inaccessible, so while living there might be really nice, the chances that we could end up living there are very low. And with Vista Del Rey, it's not that your chances of getting the chance to live there are very low, it's just that your chances of living for an extended period of time in this sub-district are very low. Again, when we look on the map, where we can see Haywood and of course Vista Del Rey sits is in this central area, so this still feels a lot like the downtown area of Night City. And I don't mean that quite literally as in the actual sub-district of downtown. That area is much more corporate and clean and commercial feeling, but this is still the dense urban area of Night City. I say this because the closer and more connected you are to that economic heart, there's an argument to say the more valuable that area is. But when that area isn't controlled by the mega corporations, it now has the potential to become a fighting zone for a bunch of gangs who want to control that valuable space. And that is exactly what is happening to Vista Del Rey. To the north of it, you have the Corpo Plaza. So this place is going to be locked down. The mega corporations have this place. It's under their control. There's no chance of some small gang coming in and taking their turf. Then, when you look to the west of Vista Del Rey, you have the Glen. This is where Night City's government is going to be. It's not as well locked down as Corpo Plaza is, but it's still going to be a bit more well kept. So this leaves Vista Del Rey as this slice of Night City that these gangs want desperately, and there's a ton of fighting going on here. It's become an absolute mess. It's getting to the point now where many people in Night City realize Vista Del Rey might become an all-out combat zone where you have warfare between the Valentino's gang and the 6th Street gang trying to get this little pocket of the central island in Night City. We will get to an actual combat zone later, but what this essentially means for Vista Del Rey is it could be on the verge of just getting cut off from the rest of the city. It's so bad they don't want to deal with it, so the people that live here that aren't a part of the gangs are just left out on their own. You could wake up one morning in your relatively affordable apartment and all of a sudden be in your own Night City Cyberpunk version of the Hunger Games. This sub-district is in such a rough state that the mega building here, Mega Building H5, is closed. It's not open, I'm not sure why, but there must be so much crime here that mega building became infested and full of problems, so the city just shut it down. The sad reality is the Valentinos aren't one of the worst gangs in Night City by a stretch. They're actually one of the more respectable gangs that protects their community. The issue with the gangs here between them and 6th Street, who kind of have a similar situation going on, you certainly wouldn't say these guys are down around the Scavengers or Maelstrom, is that they're fighting. The war between them is what causes the danger here. And if this sub-district falls into that combat zone state, then it's absolutely, objectively one of the worst places to be in Night City. You could argue that Vista Del Rey is quite comparable to Northside. They're very different because of where they sit in the city and what they're actually comprised of, but they both have major issues with poverty, unemployment, and gang violence. So as bad as Northside is, and I do definitely think that Maelstrom is much worse than the Valentinos, the risk of this turning into a combat zone is what's going to put Vista Del Rey below Northside in D tier. And again, to the east of Vista Del Rey, we have the Glen, which is going to have a lot of that spillover with the issues that are present in Vista Del Rey, given the war between the Valentinos and 6th Street gang, but the Glen is not nearly as bad, and of course, being the home of Night City's government, it's probably not going to fall into being a combat zone. The typical rule of thumb for the Glen is that the more north you are, the better off you are. The more south you go, the more it starts to look like Vista Del Rey. You have a large NCPD building here, meaning they're going to have a solid presence in the Glen, and you have Reconciliation Park, which is Night City's answer to Central Park, sort of. The Glen apartment that we can use to reference the cost of living in the area is €80,000 per month. Now, this is obviously going to vary a lot. I'm just using these as some sort of reference point because we don't have a ton of information. Again, just for reference, the apartment in Corpo Plaza is 110,000 eddies and the Japantown apartment is only 30,000 eddies. You can also imagine that being closer to the economic center of Night City provides more opportunity for you. So there is that with the Glen. It still has dangerous areas. You can't really get past that, and it's going to be pretty expensive. You know, as we proceed throughout this, Kabuki just keeps looking better and better to me. I know it's the poorest sub-district outside of Pacifica, but it's not said that it's the most dangerous sub-district outside of Pacifica. It seems like Vista Del Rey is well above it in that regard, and the Glen gets some of that bleed over. In many ways, you could argue that Kabuki is more accessible and around the same danger levels as the Glen is going to be. There are places in the Glen where you would probably be in far more danger than you would be in Kabuki. The one thing that the Glen would have over it significantly is economic opportunity. So for now, Bill, I think you'd be better off making a run at the north side of the Glen than you would be resorting to the shanties of Kabuki, but I don't think they're that far off overall as districts. So I'm going to put the Glen in B tier, and then I'm actually going to bump Kabuki up just behind it in B tier. I also want to note that the Glen has 2 mega buildings within it. Unfortunately, Mega Building H3 is also temporarily closed, just like Mega Building H5 in Vista Del Rey. Kabuki doesn't even have a mega building, so I do feel comfortable keeping the Glen above Kabuki. The final district we have to look at in Haywood is Wellsprings, and it shares a lot of similarities with the other sub-districts here. The further north you go in Wellsprings, and the closer you are to downtown and the corporate plaza, the nicer things look, and then the further south you go, the worse things look. You also have the Valentinos still having a major presence here, but the major difference is there doesn't seem to be that same ongoing turf war between them and 6th Street Gang in Wellsprings. Like I was saying earlier, living among the Valentinos isn't necessarily a net negative in Night City. The Valentinos aren't complete lunatics like Maelstrom or Scavengers, and they're not as off the rails or unpredictable as a group like the Tiger Claws are. Given that Wellsprings is coastal and often compared to a place like Venice Beach, it does see its fair share of tourism. So if you were to start some sort of business, let's say a food stall, restaurant, a bar, that sort of thing, and you were to offer a discount or maybe even free meals for members of the Valentinos, you could get their protection, and this could end up helping you a lot. Maelstrom would kidnap you and do experiments on you. Scavengers would kidnap you and steal your organs and sell them on the black market. Tiger Claws would probably extort you and maybe beat the hell out of you, whereas the Valentinos would probably just treat you well as long as you respected the community. Wellsprings is known to be the middle class of Night City. This is where your average person is, and while there might be more people living in poverty and on the lower end, if you can manage to get your way into Wellsprings and live in this mega building, you're in one of the best places in Night City. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you're in North Oak or Charter Hill, but you're in a place that's relatively safe as long as you stay out of the bad areas and it's affordable. We can see the similarities where Wellsprings shares some of those benefits that Little China and Japantown have in affordability and some level of opportunity, but they're also not war zones, or in this case, you're not surrounded by the Tiger Claws like you would be in Japantown. The Valentinos, I think, all in all, are better to be surrounded by. With all of this considered, I feel pretty comfortable dethroning Little China as our top A-tier neighborhood. We're going to put Wellsprings up there, and it's certainly in contention for that S-tier ranking. Now it's time that we head to the last somewhat reasonable district of Night City in Santo Domingo. In many ways, Santo Domingo is a much larger and more expanded upon version of Northside and Watson. Specifically, you can break down Santo Domingo into 2 sub-districts, that is Arroyo and then Rancho Coronado. Arroyo is said to be the southern and even dirtier and more derelict version of that Northside industrial district. So we can see Arroyo is another industrial district. You have power plants and factories all over the place. So we can see that the districts are quite similar in that regard, but the major difference is the gangs that function in these areas. Where Northside has Maelstrom, Arroyo has 6th Street, and that is a much better alternative. I'm not saying that 6th Street or the Valentinos are good guys, far from it, but that's sort of the point, is that within Night City, it's preposterous to assume that there are good guys. The more that you have some sort of moral standard and a gang that cares a bit more about the neighborhoods, the people, and the community, it's a better thing for that place. Within Arroyo, you have 2 mega buildings in H4 and H6, but unfortunately, H4 was home to some sort of plague, some disease that ran rampant and probably killed a lot of people in that mega building. So currently it's being quarantined. You can't get access to it. This still leaves us with H6 at least. Much like Northside and Watson, we still have the reality that many factories and power plants in Arroyo have shut down, leading to a lot of unemployment. So there's not a great amount of economic opportunity in this sub-district. It's not as dangerous as a place like Northside or Vista Del Rey, but it's certainly a lot more accessible than a place like Charter Hill or Corpo Plaza, so I'm going to go ahead and put it at the top of C tier above Charter Hill. The other half of Santo Domingo is comprised of Rancho Coronado, which is the not so masterfully planned community that was meant to house many of the employees that were going to work in Arroyo's factories. Rancho Coronado is essentially Night City's suburbs, but the thing that comes to mind with a place like this is it's not going to be nearly as densely populated. You have a lot of single family homes, meaning you're not going to have the same sort of economic opportunity in a place like this. You don't need as many businesses and services because there aren't as many people. It's a residential area only. So here's the thing, if Charter Hill is the residential area designed for the workers of Corpo Plaza, Rancho Coronado is the residential area designed for the workers of Arroyo. But as we just discussed, there aren't many workers in Arroyo. There's massive unemployment there, so this is going to be a rough place. If we look at Rancho Coronado on a map, you can actually see how few buildings are in this area relative to the other sub-districts within Night City. It's quite sparsely designed. There's a lot of open space here, so that is a plus side. But again, how are you going to be able to afford one of these homes if there's nowhere to work? We can see there aren't any mega buildings in Rancho Coronado, and what that tells us is that there's not a lot of work here. They put mega buildings in places where they think there's going to be a lot of work. So we can see, even though there's a massive unemployment in places like Northside or Arroyo, they still put mega buildings there because at one point they thought there would be work available to people. They never thought that there would be a whole lot of work available in Rancho Coronado. It's a residential area. Same thing with Charter Hill. There are no mega buildings there. I'm telling you all of this to justify the idea that I'm going to put Rancho Coronado in C tier below Arroyo and above Charter Hill. My reasoning is because I don't think Charter Hill is accessible, as I've said over and over. This is going to be a very difficult place for you to end up living. And I'm going to put it below Arroyo because I think you'd have to move to Arroyo first and then eventually save up the money to move out to Rancho Coronado. I don't think it's really available for you to just go move out to Rancho Coronado before getting some sort of job and saving up some money. And with that line of logic, that also tells me that I should move Corpo Plaza above Charter Hill because it's following the same sort of system or mode of getting to that neighborhood. You start off working in Arroyo or Corpo Plaza, living in one of the mega buildings. Eventually you save up enough money and you move out to either Rancho Coronado or Charter Hill respectively. And I just think Arroyo and Rancho Coronado are a lot more realistic for all of us bills out here, myself included. The strange thing is the jobs that might be available in Rancho Coronado are like a gas station attendant or something, and then you're probably not going to be able to afford a single family home. You're going to end up living in one of the mega buildings in Arroyo. We could technically stop our inspections right there. Pacifica is no longer considered to be a part of Night City's administrative boundaries, meaning you're not going to have NCPD here. Society has fallen into anarchy. What Pacifica was intended to be was like Las Vegas if it was put on the beach. This was going to be Night City's main attraction. You were going to have entertainment, fine dining, luxury hotels, and so much more. But after a certain set of events where you have the unification war breaking out and all of these corporations fearing many issues occurring, they just pulled out of Pacifica and left it to its devices. Then you have Haiti being hit by all sorts of natural disasters and a bunch of refugees pouring in, and this area just turned into absolute chaos. And when I say Haiti was hit by natural disasters, I don't mean like a tough hurricane. I mean, as far as I understand, Haiti is no longer a place that people live, so an entire country has been displaced and many of them ended up here. And I'm not saying that the Haitian people are responsible for the state of Pacifica, but when all of those corporations pulled out, it left openings for gangs and in particular scavengers. They moved in and started to take over the area. This is when you start to see a ton of chaos unfolding, and then when refugees are showing up, it's an open place for them to go. So now you have this situation where all of the sub-districts involved have no funding coming from the city, there's no infrastructure being taken care of, and it's just a mess. There are 3 sub-districts within Pacifica, but we can really split them into 2 halves. You have Coastview and Westwind Estate, which are much more similar, and then you have Dogtown, which is its own thing entirely. Now here's the thing about Westwind Estate and Coastview. You have 2 primary gangs here. There are other ones, but the most relevant are going to be the Voodoo Boys and then the Scavengers that we talked about earlier. Another thing worth mentioning is that if you do decide for whatever reason to go try and make a life in Coastview or Westwind Estate, you should not refer to the Voodoo Boys gang as the Voodoo Boys. You see, before this current iteration of the Voodoo Boys that is more a part of the displacement of Haitians due to natural disasters in the 2060s, there was another gang that used that name. That gang no longer has a presence in Night City as it would seem, but they did share some sort of aesthetic similarities with the Voodoo Boys of today. However, the Voodoo Boys of today would consider it insulting to their religion to refer to them as such. I say all this because the Voodoo Boys aren't your typical gang. They're a group of net runners that do a lot of virtual theft of corporations, so I don't think they're a major threat to you coming into this area, but the problem is they're not quite like the Valentinos or 6th Street gang. They do a little bit of policing, but not nearly on the same level. Their focus is on the net. They're only likely to come to the defense of a Haitian refugee, and their real focuses are put on uncovering secrets of the old net. So the bottom line is they're not that relevant to your life, but what is relevant to your life are the scavengers that are rampant in these areas. With that being said, we should be able to rank these in succession because I have a pretty good idea as to what the better of the 2 is. Westwind Estate is smaller, it's more isolated than Coastview because it's on the opposite side of Coastview and Dogtown from the rest of Night City, and it has a weaker grasp on it by the Voodoo Boys, meaning the one little bit of semblance of stability in all of Pacifica has less of a presence here than arguably the Scavengers do, which is an absolute nightmare. Remember, those are the guys that steal your cyberware and your organs and sell them on the black market. You end up getting gruesomely killed regardless. We're going to put Westwind Estate above Arasaka waterfront only because I don't think that's even a reasonable place to assume you could possibly live, and then we're going to put Coastview above Westwind Estate. Both of them are going below downtown. The reality is you'd probably be better off just trying to be homeless and eventually getting thrown out of downtown hoping that you don't get killed in the process than you would be living in either Coastview or Westwind Estate. Unlike the other parts of Pacifica, Dogtown is almost like the Las Vegas Strip, but instead of falling into anarchy, it's in some sort of pseudo-military state. Dogtown is this entirely walled-in area of the city that is now under the control of new USA Colonel Kurt Hansen and his militia force. The thing is, this militia force does run some sort of police force within it, but they don't really care about small little squabbles and fights, so if you end up getting into trouble, there's no guarantee that they're coming to your aid, not at all. This militia is essentially just a glorified gang known as Barghest. And beyond this militia, another distinguishing feature of Dogtown is the powers that be were able to repurpose a nuclear engine from a crashed aircraft to be able to supply their little city within a city with the energy that it needs. They also set up their own black market, so there's a whole economy, militia/police force, and energy being provided within this area. It is self-sufficient, walled in, cut off, and being left alone for the most part. One could imagine that if the leader of such a lawless and unstable area were to die or be killed, that you would have some sort of fight and a power vacuum that would create a lot of problems for the people that live here. Regardless, there is something of a civilization here. It's not anarchy like Westwind Estate and Coastview. It's distinct in its nature. It is not like the rest of Pacifica, so we have to give it that. The most reliable way of entering Dogtown, though, requires you to go through Coastview, so that's not ideal. Dogtown is home to criminals on the run, people trying to escape the NCPD or the various gangs in Night City. It's also home to a lot of poverty, so I'm not saying it's a good place, but it is accessible on some level. So when we're looking at this, it's like you could probably live in Dogtown for a little bit, and you can't live in North Oak. If you just keep showing up to North Oak, you're gonna get killed by the security, and it's not reasonable to assume that you're gonna be able to afford a house there anytime soon, at least. So For that reason, I'm going to put Dogtown in D tier, but at the bottom. I think you'd still be better off in Vista Del Rey. And I know it might seem ridiculous, like you're putting Dogtown, a place in Pacifica, an actual combat zone, into D tier above downtown, but again, it just comes down to accessibility. How are you going to be able to afford to live in downtown Night City? It's just not happening. Not for your average bill, at least, but feel free to debate that. With that being said, I honestly have to drop North Oak down below all of Pacifica pretty much, and I'll just leave it above the Arasaka waterfront because it's so inaccessible. Now we have to get to the bottom of which subdistrict belongs in S tier, and I think I know which it is. It's the lost underwater city of Laguna Bend. Long live Laguna Bend. But if you can't swim, it's going to be Wellsprings. Aww. Wellsprings ultimately is that perfect mix of affordability, economic opportunity, safety, community. I think this has the best Night City actually has to offer and is also attainable for your average person. Then in A tier, we have Little China in Japantown. I'm fine leaving this the way it is because Japantown is not as affordable and arguably a little bit more dangerous because of the control, the tight control that the Tiger Claws have over this subdistrict. Then in B tier, we have the Glen and Kabuki. The Glen is very much just a worse version of Wellsprings, less accessible, a little bit more dangerous, so I feel fine with that staying in B tier. Kabuki is definitely debatable. My bias is probably putting it here because I just don't want to see the problems with Kabuki, but Kabuki is staying right there. It's kind of like a little bit of a worse Little China. We can also rank the greater districts overall and order them to see how they stack up. So we'll do this by assigning a numerical value to the letter associated with the particular ranking. So for example, F tier ranking will award that subdistrict 1 point, and then S tier will award that subdistrict 6 points. Then we can add up the value of all of those subdistricts within that particular district and divide it by the number of subdistricts that are within the district. That might have sounded kind of convoluted, but whatever, it's all for fun. This is just giving us an average score for the district based on its subdistricts rankings. Haywood is in first place with a 4.0 average score. Wellsprings is really helping that out, of course, being in S tier. Then you have Watson, which is a 3.0, but we actually have a three-way tie with our middle three districts. Watson, Westbrook, and Santo Domingo all come out to having a 3.0. City Center has a 2.0. This makes sense because Corpo Plaza is in C tier, and that's its highest subdistrict, and then Downtown is in F tier. We only have 2 subdistricts within that district. And then Pacifica is at the bottom, of course, because it has 2 districts in F tier. It has a score of 1.33. But here's the thing, kid. The game was rigged from the start. It turns out your former boss, Alice, was working for Mr. House. You've been sent here to Night City, and with your new Karoshi optics installed, now all of the data and information that you process as you live in this new world is going to be sent back to Mr. House. If you're sharp, you've realized that this also means I too am working for Mr. House. He sent me here to help you stay alive, not out of the kindness of his heart, but rather for business, of course. I hope you understand. I gotta keep the lights on back at the NV Ranger & Co. offices. Like I said, we can't all live in North Oak. So now that you know you've been brutally stabbed in the back and abandoned in this dystopian world, if you too want to help out NV Ranger & Co., like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe a dislike, and that's okay, I understand. You should still subscribe though, and maybe leave a comment and tell me how mad you are. Anyways, good luck in Night City. Let me know which sub-district you're headed towards, and I'll see you in the comments.